Okay.
You did it.
I gotta try one more time here. This needs to be shorter. I need to get this shorter here, right? What is the question I'm answering or the problem I'm solving? That's what I need to think right now. Kind of back and forth. What problem am I trying to solve right now? No, see, I don't know where I'm going with. Okay guys, we're out here with Millie. Millie has been here for 8 days exactly and is crushing her sit stay. We've been trying to come up with a video for the last 10 minutes and she's held the sit stay for probably the entire time because I can't figure out what it is that I want to say. A lot of people ask us, how much time do you have to dedicate to the training process? Right now I'm multitasking. I got a bunch of texts coming through, a bunch of emails coming through that I'm trying to stay current on while we're getting in our training session with the dog. So technically, we don't need to add additional time to our day and like block out 30 minutes, 45 minutes. We just need to start incorporating our training in our day-to-day life so it becomes easier for you. You're not adding additional things, you're just changing the things that you're already doing to make it productive for the dog. Additionally, we are proofing real-life examples where you might need the training. She's never been on this side of the training room before. She's always been on the other side, over in the other facility, and obviously, I don't want her off exploring and stuff like that. I want her staying focused in on the task and getting used to being in this environment while looking to me for direction. You can see she's further relaxing because she's been holding that sit stay for literally like 12 minutes now at this point, and she laid down, which if you've seen her post, I have no problem with because she's continuing to stay stable in the expectation that I have for her. So this is how far your dog can get. Again, 8 days. She's never been here before. She's doing great. What are you doing? What? Can you stop spinning? What's going on?
So she's had basic training, so she knows sit, come, down, stay.
Basics.
Yes. She's actually pretty good off leash too. Like she'll wander, but she comes when called usually.
Yep.
I guess I'm just having more like behavioral issues, and I don't know if that's something that you're able to address here, or if there's something else. Like if I need to seek an animal behaviorist type thing. So one of the things is incessant barking when we're in the car, particularly. If we're on the freeway, she's fine, but if she sees people on the regular streets, she's like going nuts. The other thing is that she is eating things again, which like actually swallowing them. She's had to have 2 surgeries because of blockages, and she also is she's better at being not as leash reactive, but she was at one point very leash reactive. Lunging at dogs, lunging at people, barking at anybody that walked by. Like I can't walk by anybody without her like wanting to at least approach them.
Like as in you still can't do that, or you couldn't do that?
I couldn't do that. I mean, before it was like she would bark at them and it was like a scary situation for probably the other person.
Sure.
But now we can walk by, but she'll still like go over to that person. And I don't know, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
How people are about that. And then the other thing is that like I try and take her with me to a lot of stores and things like that. So every time I go to Marshall's, I try and take her.
Sure.
The last time we were in though, I was just looking at something, I had her on leash, and a person walked by, an employee, and she just like lunged and was like barking at her like aggressively, and I was like, what the
Sure.
heck was that? I don't know what that was about.
Okay.
So.
All right. Barking in the car,
Yes.
Eating stuff she shouldn't.
Yes.
Some reactivity issues still.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the positive is those are pretty easy things to solve.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Peeing.
Well, that's another thing, obviously. But
Okay.
so give me what do you mean? Like she's having accidents in the house, or?
Accidents in the house, but every time I go to like put her e-collar on in the house, now she like gets nervous and pees. Or especially if she has something in her mouth that she's not supposed to, I go to chase her to get it. Once I get a hold of her, she squats and pees.
Okay.
And if she gets, sometimes she's excitable and will pee. She's kind of not been doing that as much, but anytime she's like in trouble or anything.
Yeah, like the submissive urination.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, so submissive urination, in a nutshell, really is there's a lot of conflict and association with the situation, right? And yeah, she's getting nervous and going because of that. So typically, the solution for those types of things, obviously, excitable urination is a different thing, but submissive urination is we want to reduce the conflict as much as possible, right? So a lot of that intimate space, like, no, you're not supposed to have that, and like going over and grabbing and stuff like that, could be really like whoa to some dogs.
Right.
You know what I mean? That kind of social pressure that we're putting on them in that situation can be very, very kind of off-putting, which will cause them to submit and pee, right? So we want to reduce the conflict, right? And we want to be able to discipline for that behavior in a way where it's like just matter of fact, right? There's no anger behind it, right? There's no frustration involved in it or anything like that. It's just matter of fact, right? Nope, you're not allowed to have that. Here's your correction, right? Things like that. So what I would recommend is we'll see as we start working through some of this if that starts to go down or not, right? Because in a lot of cases it will, like, you know, especially when you deal with things that are like, oh my God, like we've already had 2 surgeries, we spent all this money on this, right? Like I could imagine like your brain immediately when you see she has something is like, oh my God, you're not supposed to have this, right?
She swallows it so fast.
Yeah, no,
Like,
I totally get it. Yeah. So, you know, because of that, again, like that's like a high pressure situation that she's encountering, right? So again, as we decrease some of the stress associated with that, we should see her kind of loosen up a little bit more, right? We see that a lot with dogs where there's just like a lot of little shit in the house that it's like we just can't get a handle on, you know what I mean? And it's like we're constantly like butting heads, and if we have a dog that's a little bit more like sensitive to that, like I said, social pressure and stuff like that, they'll start resorting to things like that or just like acting a little funny or those types of things, right? So that one I would say is more of like a byproduct of some of the other issues that you described as opposed to its own independent problem.
Okay.
Right. Let's take that example of you were saying in the car, right? So is the excessive barking in the car, is it typically triggered towards something? Like she sees a person and she's freaking out at the person?
Or a dog.
It's not like she's just like in the car just barking to bark kind of thing?
No, it's
okay.
it's if she sees a person.
I understand. Okay, gotcha. So it's reactivity still then at that point. Okay, that clarifies that for me a little bit. Yeah, so let's say we're at a 60, right, in the car, right? And she, starts freaking out at the person, and we go to give our correction for that, right? And she does a little, I kind of care about this, but like I'm gonna keep doing it. Yeah. That's a telltale sign of one of 2 things, right? If we're ever trying to inhibit a behavior and the dog is not responding to the information that we're giving them, it's always gonna be because of one of 2 things. Thing number 1 would be we're not being clear, right? And clarity can come in the form of, are we correcting at the right time? It could come in the form of, are we being consistent enough about the expectation with them as far as like every time they do this, are we doing the exact same thing, et cetera, et cetera. If it's not the clarity, it's motivation, right? She doesn't care enough about the consequence. In your case, I would say it's probably a combination of the 2, right? If she was blowing through that correction, that's typically a telltale sign she doesn't care enough about it. But like you had kind of said, you've been a little inconsistent about how you've addressed it. Like sometimes you kind of proactively are like correcting when she's thinking about it. Sometimes you're correcting when she starts doing it. Sometimes it's just a, hey, knock it off. Sometimes it's an e-collar correction, right? So we want to kind of clarify all of that and put together the pieces of this is exactly how we go about addressing this exact scenario. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah.
So we'll again get into how exactly to do that. And then getting into then the pica related stuff or whatever you want to call it, her eating things all the time, right? That one's a pain in the ass, I know, obviously. We see a lot of dogs that come in with that where it's like, God, it's like every time I look away, it's like they have something they're not supposed to have. basically the way to get past that is going to be for like a week or two, you have to treat this dog like she's an 8-week-old puppy, right?
I was gonna say, like, she's like a freaking toddler.
I know.
Like, literally, I have to watch her at all times.
And the problem is just they've learned they can do it, right? Like, it can get frustrating. We can look at them and be like, you know, you're not supposed to do this and stuff like that. But it's like, she does, but she's also gotten away with it like 90% of the time that she's rehearsed it. So even though she knows, like, you kind of get mad like when I'm doing something like this, she still gets away with it more often than not, where she's like, well, maybe it's not that she doesn't want me to do. You know what I mean? So we've got to essentially hit a point here where it's like every single time she rehearses that behavior in this situation, every single time she rehearses this behavior, we are in a position to catch it and correct for it, right? Because if we don't, it's going to continue to persist, right? And sometimes it can get daunting when we're like, you know, God, it's like for like ever, I'm gonna have to be so glued on her, right? But the only time that it hits a point where it's like forever, I'm constantly nagging the dog is if we're inconsistent about catching it, right? If you could spend 5 to 7 days or like 7 to 10 days just making sure we've nipped this in the butt every time she does it, you will see it literally go away, right?
And what I'm supposed to be doing is like really like manually.
Yeah, leash pops.
Yes. But she was getting to a point where she was actually snapping at me.
Yeah.
Doing that.
Well, if you look at the leash pop, right, not that they're bad by any means, right? A leash pop is a regular correction we could use to give to a dog. But if we're not giving it in a way that the dog actually cares about, again, get back to all the conflict associated with some of this kind of stuff. It's like we could constantly just be like, no, 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 right? Like popping. And it's like just pissing them off because they don't care enough about it to change their behavior, but it's like naggy and annoying, you know what I mean? Where you'll start getting some of that like redirecting, they like turn around and give you a little attitude and stuff like that. So, you know, again, if we're going to give a correction, the point is, or the purpose of the correction is it should decrease a behavior, right? So if I'm finding myself, take a heel position, for example, if I'm finding myself correcting like 17,000 times over the course of the walk to get her to stay in heel, I'm doing something wrong. You know what I mean? Because she doesn't care about it. She's not fixing her behavior. The correction is losing its purpose. So here's what we're going to do.
Oh, perfect. There's people coming.
Excellent. So here, let's go off to the side for a minute. Come on. So basically what we need to do right off the rip here is we need to kind of just simplify everything, right? You've got a lot of different things you're kind of doing to try to get her to do this, right? You're giving leash pops, giving e-collar corrections sometimes, obviously. We're saying no, we're saying we're saying heel, we're saying wait. Like there's just so much happening and none of it really means anything to her right now because we've just kind of exhausted all of it. You know what I mean? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be doing a couple things, right? One is we're gonna be conditioning in one single command here, right? Command I wanna work on is heel, obviously, right? From there, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have one clear way to enforce that position, right? When I say enforce that position, I mean if she stops doing it for whatever reason, we have a way we can get her to do it again. Right? So the verbal command we're going to be giving is heel. I don't care about hand commands or anything. I know a lot of places do those. I want to make sure she's listening to us verbally, obviously, right? And our way of enforcing it is going to be telling her no with an e-collar correction. Got it? So what we'll do in a second is we'll start walking. I'll tell her heel. We'll start cruising. If she gets out of position, I'm just going to say no, tap that button, then tell her heel again. Okay, you can come up here a little bit more.
Pretty good.
I think that looked pretty good.
Wow.
Right? So again, no. Heel. Good. So again, just the impulsiveness, right? We got to get rid of some of that here, right? Now, yes, I think she did pretty good right there, and that's because, again, we simplified it, right? We gave one expectation. There was 0 commands given aside from that heel, and I had one very clear way to enforce it that she learned how to avoid, right? Because I was clear about the expectation, I was motivating enough about the expectation, so she learned how to avoid that correction. Now, one thing that you'll see that is different about us versus a lot of other training companies, particularly ones that use like a heel, we are very loose about the the heel position, right?
Okay.
Meaning, a lot of places get super strict about it. It's right here, and you can't get right here, can't get right here, it's gotta be right here, right? Listen, again, like I used to train competitive dogs and stuff like that. Like I understand like teaching a formal heel position, all that kind of stuff. We're not training a competition dog right now, right? We're training a pet dog here, right? So we need to make sure she's gonna give us good attention on the walk and not yank our arm out of the socket, right? So my expectation with heel, or in our case we use come for it, but heel's fine, obviously. Our expectation with it is you gotta be in the bubble with your attention on me, right? Meaning, if you get a little bit ahead, that's fine, as long as the attention is still on me. You'll notice a couple of times she got a little ahead, but she was checking in the whole time, right?
She doesn't do that.
Yes, so we're kind of being a little looser about our expectation, but we're being much firmer, or much more firm about enforcing that expectation then at that point. So what that does is it makes it easier for her to be successful, right? Instead of being, you know, nagging like crazy, this like 3-inch difference right here, I could give her a little looser of a criteria so she can kind of relax into it, but then she can understand more clearly that boundary for not doing it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so one real quick question though.
Yeah.
You said heel, did you say heel once at the beginning of the walk and that was it?
That's it. Once I put you into command, you're in command.
Okay, and then with the correction, did you say no, or you just?
Yep. Yeah, so the correction sequence is always going to be no, then correction, then command. And breaking down that sequence, right? The no marker is identifying the mistake. It's telling her that thing you just did right there is incorrect. The tap is what actually does the work, right? So the no like attaches the correction to the behavior, right? And then the command reiterates to the dog what they should be doing once they've made a mistake.
Okay.
Right? So no, I identify the mistake. Correction, I reinforce it. Heel, I let her know what it is she's supposed to be doing.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So that's what I'm saying though, like when you're walking, you reinforce, I'm sorry. You
That's great.
say no, you do the correction, and then do you say heel again?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so you are reinforcing.
After I've corrected, I want to reiterate what it is they're supposed to be doing.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but I'll never just repeat a command. The repeated command always comes after the correction.
Okay.
Right? So I've corrected, you messed this up, this is what I want you to do.
Okay.
Right?
Got it.
All right, we're gonna keep cruising here.
Okay.
Heel, so again, set it right at the beginning, now we're cruising. There's just a couple general rules of thumb you need to follow, right? So one of them is, if we say no, we have to give a correction, right? No by itself is not a correction, right? No's a marker, right? There's rarely any dogs out there on the face of the planet that us just saying no to them is like enough of a consequence where they're like, holy shit, I shouldn't do that next time. You know what I mean? Second rule of thumb, we don't repeat commands. Right? I think a lot of people fall into the trap, even when you were going out the doorway, right? Or when we were in the lobby, we'll make it right here. You know, you told her down a couple times, she got up out of it, and you just put her back in the down, right, without any sort of correction or anything. The second we start getting into this routine of repeating commands too much, not giving corrections for broken commands, all those types of things, we diminish the value of those words. We start teaching them that instead of down being the command or heel being the command, it's down, down is the command, heel, heel is the command, right? Exactly, right?
That's one of my pet peeves, is having to repeat myself, having to raise my voice, having to scream.
100%, and that's kind of another one, is if we're finding ourselves needing to do those things, right, raise your voice, yell, stuff like that, again, it's a telltale sign we're doing something wrong. We'll make it right here. Like, I don't ever need to like yell at my dogs, you know what I mean? Like, I have clear enough ways to communicate with them where I don't need to resort to that. And typically when you hit a point where you're like yelling and screaming and stuff like that, you're so frustrated at that point, it's like we're not doing anything that's, you know, creating any sort of benefit at that point as is, right?
Absolutely.
This should be, again, a non-confrontational, smooth process, right? Dog training is a language, and the only reason why the dog isn't listening is because they don't understand that information we're giving them, right? We're not doing our part in being clear enough.
Yeah. They always, I don't want to say they always, but I've heard it's the handler.
Yeah, I mean, it's the age-old saying of like the owner needs training, not the dog. Like that's true to an extent, right? Like obviously there's things we need to teach dogs, but typically at that point when somebody comes here and is like, hey, I'm having this issue, or this issue, almost 100% of the time it's adjusting something the handler is doing.
Okay. This here?
Sure.
Put it down.
Cool. And just have her hold that for a minute. I think she looks really good. I'm not seeing any glaring issues or anything like that that, you know, needs a ton of work by any means. I'm seeing tightening things up on your end, you know. There's a couple things I would start doing in like the immediate, right? So in the short term here, the walk, you should be able to get under control right away, right? I think if you follow that principle, like we did of initial command, then just give that correction if she doesn't do it, and then adjust your level up and down based on how she's responding to it, you're gonna see an immediate change in her behavior on the walk, right? Even things like if you're on the walk and you do a down, right? Consistently giving your correction if she breaks that down position as opposed to just getting her back into it, right? You're gonna see a huge difference in that, right? Past those things, eating things she's not supposed to, you got to go back to for a week. Like, she cannot have a second that she could get away with doing that, right? Where she can't get caught, right? I would just have that thing set all the way up, ready to just nip that in the butt the second that I see her get into anything. And I would set it up a couple times, really try to just get it under control, right? The barking in the car, same concept, right? The only thing we're gonna do to address that problem is just give a correction every time she does it. So you can keep that remote in your center console, right? She starts barking at something, wait until she actually does it, just give your correction for it. No tap, no tap, right? Behavioral issues like that, we're not gonna give a command after or anything, because the only thing I care about is that you stop doing that thing, right? Same deal, personally, I would just get that under control. I would just keep that e-collar set all the way up for that, right? And I think you should be able to get those 3 immediate goals pretty under control pretty quickly with her, right? I think that, like I said, this is all mostly just like a clarity issue with her at this point.
So he's doing pretty good. Like at the house, he's doing a lot better. We haven't had people really now a lot. Like obviously when baby was first born, we had people all the time. Like now it's still mostly just family. Her friend is here. She's been here over the weekend and stuff. He's gotten better like with her and then just being around her now continuously.
Cool.
Like he was playing with her a bit now.
Yeah, it's good.
You know, he still doesn't want to be pet by anyone, but he'll go up to them and you know, initiate. The one big thing, like we kind of noticed is on walks when it's the 4 of us with the baby, like he's, if I try to like, you know, it's not so much with people, but with dogs now. If I try to make space, like she's on the sidewalk, I try to go into the street to make some space, he's still very kind of aggressive towards that other dog.
And then if he corrects him,
if I go to correct him, he like give a snarl.
And it kind of makes it worse.
He like that's even more amped up for that. And it's usually just when it's with all of us now. When it's bad. Like there's other times where I've been walking him and you know he'll have something, I'll correct him, and he'll listen. It takes him a while to listen when it's like all of us now. I feel like when we're like separated. It's mostly now with dogs. People, I mean, there was one time I was walking just the 2 of us, and I kind of walked around the car real close to us, you know, we didn't see him coming, and he was fine. You know, so I wasn't sure.
Now, as far as where you're giving the corrections, like, what's the sequence as far as like, so you're walking with him, you see another dog, it sounds like you're kind of swaying away from everybody to create some space, and then does he start like pulling towards, and then you give your correction and then that kind of amps him up, or is that kind of what it looks like? Okay, I gotcha. And have you found yourself lately correcting lower, higher than usual? You know what I mean? Like, did you fall into a trap of like, okay, so things are going well, so we started keeping the level a little bit lower, and then like we started giving lower corrections, which started like, does that kind of sound?
Yeah, so it was like a lower correction, and then the lower one wouldn't do anything, so I would turn it up. And then he would like kind of, that's when he did like snarl and stuff. And
okay, so normal trap that I see people fall into with stuff, especially once things like you get to this place where it's like things are going so well, right? And then we start loosening up on the dog a little bit as far as the corrections and stuff, because it's like things are going pretty good. And then what happens is we start giving corrections that are way too low for more high arousal things. And then we try to play this game of like up a little, up a little, up a little, up a little, and it winds up just totally amping the dog up, right? So what I try to do in those settings is I just start dramatically higher than whatever I normally would, right? So the second I see that other dog before he even makes a mistake, if we were starting at a 40 before, maybe we're gonna start at a 70 this time or something, you know what I mean? Right. That way, that first correction I need to give right there and then is like, whoa, this is different, right? And totally snaps him off of it, as opposed to like, oh, I'm focused on this thing, I don't like that. You know what I mean? Like where he gets like irritated by it.
Now, what would you suggest? Say we're walking and we can't create, obviously, like I can't leave the stroller and I can't leave him.
Yeah.
What do you suggest? We can't make distance.
So that's a good question, right? So we want to, our number one reason why we're creating distance is just to make sure if he were to lunge, he couldn't get all the way to whatever the trigger is. You know what I mean? So that may be, right? So say I have the stroller. Can I see this real quick? Can I see the leash real quick? And the e-collar? Thank you. Come here, bud. Right, so say we're walking this way, right? Let's say there's another person walking like right by this line right here, right? And I can only realistically get to like here, right? What a lot of people will do is they'll take this leash and they will just like cram this thing towards them as much as they can, right? Because they're like, man, if he lunges, I want to make sure I have control over him, and I want to make sure he's not going to freak out and like bite the other dog or bite the other person, which again, I get, but the problem is we know that all this tension does is makes him want to lunge and react more. It cues him up, it frustrates him, right? Instead, what I'll try to do is I'll give him something really clear to focus on, and I'll try to get him to do it somewhere where he's away from that trigger, right? So if we're walking, I'm gonna create as much distance as I can, even if it's right here. I'll pull him over here, sit, give that sit command, and then I'm not going to put any tension on the leash, but I am gonna still shorten my leash up as much as I can, right? So maybe to like right there, where there's zero tension on that leash, but I am ready to yank that thing if I need to, if you were to try to lunge, right? From there, we just crank the e-collar up, make sure it's set at a nice high level just in case, and we let that thing pass by, right? And then from there, let's say there's another dog coming by, right? Sometimes what I'll do is I'll be in a position to block the other dog if I need to, right? So what that might look like is say another dog's coming over and I see it start sniffing here, right? Like, sorry, dude, like you're not getting all the way over here, right? Sometimes I may communicate to the owner, right? Because there's almost never a situation where like nobody can create distance, right? Sometimes we might be positioned in just a vulnerable spot, right? So sometimes what I'll do is I'll communicate to the owner, hey, do you mind giving us a little bit of space here right now? Or something, you know, polite like that, but like, hey, like help us out. You know, we're trying to manage a baby and a dog here. You know what I mean?
A lot of people are good with that.
Yeah, most people are very, you know, and especially too, like you get your dog off to the side, you put him in that sit, you're in a position to address it, obviously. You know, most people see that, and that's kind of like the unspoken rule of like, hey, like please don't, you know, come up to my dog. Let's use this as an example. We're gonna run a drill with Kayla. I'll show you kind of how I would handle this. Right, and you see the hackles are up a little bit, but I'm not cueing them up more by adding more tension. You go and do that like 1 or 2 more times real quick. But I'm short on the leash, right? I could easily pull them away if I need to in this situation, right? Right, so like something like that, right? You gotta start to, that's good, thank you. A part of it is you got to start to build trust in them also. You know what I mean? Like sometimes the only way you start getting past some of these harder situations is by putting them in it. You know what I mean? And trusting that you can keep them under control through it. You know what I mean? I'm very confident in his understanding of the position. I'm very confident in my timing with my e-collar, right? Where I know when that dog is passing by, if I have this thing high enough and if I correct at the right moment, I'm going to be able to keep him focused in and under control. I really think that you just got to get on him on the walk a little more. You know, what I want to do is I want to have you guys work with that for a week or so. We'll cut it a little short in case we got to get you back in and do another brush up. If you're still having issues with it, we'll just do the park again or something, like Edgewater. But I think you need to just starting significantly higher, right? Just kind of cap it off, get it under control. And then some of those things sit. Some of those things we talked about as far as, you know, other people passing by and stuff, just making sure you're staying loose on the leash. All that kind of comes into play as well. So. Look at you guys. Yeah, right? Superstar. What we're gonna do to start here is I wanna start conditioning him in. When he feels this pressure, it means to start moving towards me, right? So this is, in addition to teaching him to move towards me, it's also gonna start to teach him to shift his attention away from things, right? So what I'm gonna do is just start walking around. If I need to give a leash pull, I'm gonna be pairing a tap on the e-collar with that. Yeah, kind of. So the e-collar is gonna kind of come at the same time as the leash pull for right now, just kind of teaching them that they're the same thing, right? It's a tap, so there's a couple different ways you could use it, obviously. There we go. Yeah, there's a ton of different ways you could use it. So basically, you could use it as continuous pressure. You could use it, there we go. You could use it as a single tap, obviously, and it just depends on what you're working on. So if I were teaching something brand new, right? So let's say I wanted to teach him how to get onto the bed with the e-collar, right? How a lot of people will do it is they'll teach them when they feel the e-collar pressure, getting onto the bed turns it off. So they'll hold the button down, he gets on the bed, button comes off, right? So you're kind of teaching them basically that the off switch for it is being on the bed, and they start to make that correlation, right? Right now, we're not really teaching something new per se. We're kind of teaching him to stop doing something, right? So instead of using the continuous pressure like that, I'm using the e-collar a little bit more like a correction here when he's leaving my space, right? So that single tap right there, we want him to start to learn to avoid, right? Like the leash pop, same exact concept, right? And we'll probably, as we move further along through the program, we'll probably go back and forth between using it as the continuous pressure and using it as the pop, right? Just depending on what we're working on. But in this case, I'm trying to inhibit some of that here. No. Exactly. Good. Go work, buddy. You're kind of a pain today. That's okay though. All right, so we'll build on that next time. Obviously, we just got to get him back in the swing of things here. Obviously, we were getting ready to get rolling, and then but we're back at it, so that's all right. Now, here's the thing. I always tell everybody, whether we have young dogs, old dogs, whatever, we always encounter a hurdle at some point, right? And it's usually always some sort of big roadblock that sits in our way. For some dogs, it's not till the end. For some dogs, it's near the beginning. Maybe this is his, we're just getting it out of the way. You know what I mean? Because really the thing is, if you look at a lot of issues that we'll have with a dog, right? A lot of them are gonna stem from just that drive to do something else and not listen to the thing that you're doing, right? Or you want them to do, I should say, right? And that's exactly what that is. The root of the problem here has nothing to do with the leash walking or the bed stay or the sit stay or anything like that. It just has to do with the fact that when he gets separated from something he wants to get to, his number one go-to is just fight with all his might to get back to that thing. So working through that issue will affect everything else, right? If we can get him past that thing, it's like, bed stay is no problem, sit stay is no problem, down stay is no problem, because he knows that he can't get himself into that state of mind that's getting him in all that trouble. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And in a lot of cases, like if we have a dog that has a rough session, like how he struggled today for that, at least for the second half of the session, a lot of times they come back the next time much, much better. So we'll see what we get, obviously. I'm not sweating it. So.